My point is on this issue of sex education and sex discipline and self-respect. There must be a massive countercultural movement by no less than the people who have the ears of the masses of our young people. The first generation by age 15 has watched 18,000 hours of television, about 700,000 murders, 20-odd thousand hours of radio, less than 11,000 hours of school, and less than 3,000 hours of church. So who has the maximum access to our children's minds? Mass media has more access and makes a greater impression than home, church, and school combined. That's a kind of centralization of our society where very central messages are being fed in.
This is ABM, Alternative Broadcasting Media, brought to you by GordonGlobal.org. I'm your host, KinGGrolle.
What's happened to the black man?
It's like they've given up. It's like they're really not a part of what's going on.
Why are they not? Why have they given up?
There aren't that many jobs, okay, for the laborer like there used to be. And they're just totally unmotivated. And society has made living for the women without the husband or without the male easy.
Oh?
Yeah, welfare. I think welfare is not the best thing for everybody.
Tell me why.
Because it provides you with some kind of income that you sooner or later just settle for. I know I was on welfare. I've been on welfare.
Are you suggesting that we do away with welfare?
No, I'm saying it has to be upgraded. For instance, I have some young people here that are on welfare, okay, but would like to work. But they can't work and make a coin because everything you make is taken away from your check.
Can you push the solution even further back? Is there any way to stop the cycle of teenage pregnancies?
That's so difficult to even talk about. In my heart, I think I have a solution, and I know, it may rub people the wrong way. But I believe that teenage pregnancy cannot be stopped by programs. It has to be morals, and morals come from God. And somewhere along the line, the black family kind of strayed away from that, and I believe we need it.
You say the moral values have changed.
Oh, yes. It's morally acceptable to have babies. It was not morally acceptable years ago. That's hurting the black family.
What I hear you saying is that even though racism may have brought about these circumstances, even though society may have created conditions that are terrible, you're saying you have to be responsible. You have to practice discipline and self-restraint.
That's right. We are destroying ourselves. Now, it might have been motivated and plotted and seeded with racism, but we're content to be in this well now, okay? We're just content to be in this mud, and we need to get out of it. There aren't any great white people running around in this block tearing up stuff. It's us. We've got to stop doing that.
Does the civil rights movement, which came to its peak in the 60s, have anything to say to this?
The civil rights to the young people now is a foreign word. What does it really mean to them? They don't have any knowledge about it.
The issue now is different, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I'm quite sure it is. If Martin Luther King were alive, he would not be talking about the things I think he was talking about, labor and all that. I think he'd be talking about the black family.
And you're worried about the survival of the black family. You think it's precarious?
I think it's going to be an endangered species.
Even though the messages that kids are getting from society seems to say, do anything you want to, the United States government of New Jersey, a white man like Moyers cannot step in and say to young black kids, it's not right to have children out of wedlock. Welfare needs to be changed. You've got to take responsibility. Who's going to say these things to these kids?
Why can't you say it?
They won't listen to me.
Doesn't make any difference. You got to say it anyway. They may not listen to me either. But I'm saying if you say it in your corner and I say it in my corner and everybody is saying it, it's going to be like a drum beat. And sooner or later it will sound. But it's not just for me to talk about. It's for all of us to talk about. And I think it's going to surpass colors. And you're not going to be safe, I'm not going to be safe, and nobody's going to be safe unless we all send out this drumbeat. Hey, let's deal with it. Let's deal with the problem.
Saying that babies making babies. The idea of a girl thinking that being pregnant is a beautiful profile as a sense of being, of looking all right. That says that the decadence has hit a point where we must en masse join hands and stop finger pointing and go another way.
It's not only that, it's the music. You know, even our music. Every song you hear, there's no real message except more sex, more lowering of your values and morals. You can't even hear a good song. The song has a good beat, but you listen to the words are outrageous.
Director Knox, you heard in the beginning of the broadcast some of the young women say male figures are not essential. They don't think their children need a father. Did that ring true to you on the basis of your experience with these kids?
I think that a family means a husband and a wife. Yeah. So I'm very, very perplexed, to hear females say that they don't believe that they need to have a man around.
I think people say what they have to say. These women don't have any prospect of marriage, and so they have rationalized their lives the way they see them. We saw women who are surrounded by other women in the prior generation who also had no husbands, and this has become, therefore, intergenerational and expectable, and thus they say what indeed turns out to be, at least for them, quite realistic.
That's one concern. Secondly, there are some areas in there of moral degeneracy. The young man with all of the babies without any sense of responsibility, that is moral degeneracy, and it's not genetic, it's environmental, and therefore we have some obligation to speak of the need for moral regeneration.
The danger is that in the process of giving this problem, which I think is a discrete and identifiable problem, too much attention, we will stigmatize the individuals involved, and we will adversely affect the way in which the rest of the American society perceives this problem. The danger is well-founded because there are people in this society who would make use of these kinds of images in order to legitimize certain mean-spirited policy inclinations that they have and not deal seriously with the problem. But what I want to say is that there is a discrete, identifiable inner-city context, such as that described in Newark, which is repeated in many, many other communities around the country, and which is in some ways different from, not better or worse, but different in its particulars from the situation of West Virginia or of rural Arkansas or whatever. We could see in this film the importance of peers, the importance of what might be called the local culture, the values and the interactions between people that were happening in that particular context.
You know, Bill, the reason I keep trying to keep this issue broader than just a black situation, for the reason that Dr. Lowry said it. I remember once speaking in a Washington, D.C. school about the impact of drugs and liquor and babies making babies and violence. And I challenge the youth in that environment to make a choice, as it were, to choose hope over dope and to give life a chance. And those who could really hear me with their inner ear to come forward. 600, about 300 came forward having experimented with some form of drugs. And it was traumatic to see that many boys and girls come forward. And so next day I went to Montgomery County and then went to the Latin school just outside of Harvard there in Boston. And when white children came forward in even greater numbers, it shifted from they got a problem to we got a problem.
I said in the beginning of the program that white families are in trouble too. The single-parent family is twice as common in the country as it was 20 years ago. But in the 1960s, when this issue of what was happening, the breakdown of the black family in particular was raised, we all retreated from it. And as a consequence of that, blacks, in meetings that I've attended and read about and listened to, are debating the issue within the black community. And the facts are there. They come from the Census Bureau. They come from the Children's Defense Fund, that the rate of birth to black teens is twice that for whites. Women had 50% of all black families with children under 18 compared to 15% for white children. Only 41% of black children are living with both parents compared to 80% of white children and 70% of Hispanic children. So while it is true that white families are in trouble, that blacks are not the only ones who have children out of wedlock, the reality says that it's pronounced, it's exaggerated, it's concentrated in many respects among black families. Are you willing to admit that? I'm
not only willing to admit it, I think we've got to sound the alarm about it. And I think increasingly that alarm is being sounded from within the black community, and that is the important change. I think that has occurred. There is no question that this is a phenomenon that stretches across the face of the United States, and I couldn't agree with Jesse more, that we have to deal with it in its national context. At the same time, I think it is clear that it has reached crisis proportions in our community when half of all the children are being born to single women who are disproportionately poor. We see the face of the next generation of black people. And if we keep this up, if we don't find a way to intervene, and it is so complex that intervention has got to take place on a number of levels, but if we do not find a way to intervene, we are going to see progressively greater disadvantage with each generation of black people, which is the antithesis of the American imperative.
There is a study at the University of Chicago that says if action is not taken, the year 2000, 14 years from now, we'll see 70% of all black families headed by single women and only 30% of black men employed. Now, that's the future you're talking about.
And you know, in some sense, when we had the lack of government support mechanisms in days gone by, the only bulwark we had really was a sense of moral resistance, a sense of discipline, a sense of hope against hopelessness.
What's happened to that?
Well, in some sense, that hope has many of the grapes have been turned into raisins, and a lot of despair has set in. And I remember some years ago, about 1976, you might recall, Attorney Norton and I began to talk about in our schools about opportunity was about to outdistance effort, and that a formula of effort to the third power plus opportunity represented a breakthrough. And somehow we must keep this balance between effort and opportunity. In one sense, is in this film an awful lot of despair, and in our analysis of it, we must not give the impression that we're defending it or trying to justify it, because it really is unjustifiable. I go to schools, Bill, and I'll ask 4,000 to 5,000 children, white, black, and brown, how many of you know someone who is dead because of drugs? Almost every hand will go up. How many know someone who is in jail because of drugs? Every hand goes up. In your generation, how many know someone at this school who has taken drugs? Hands up. How many know someone who has brought a gun or a knife to school? And I'll tell you whether it is the suburbs of Montgomery County or San Diego or Newark or Boston, it is a pervasive threat to this generation of young people. And the most fundamental question when I ask them, do you believe taking drugs and babies having babies is morally wrong? There's a split opinion. There's no absolute ethic or moral resistance to taking drugs or the baby. Then I said, well, do you think that taking drugs will kill you? Well, we're not sure. You can afford a baby. Not sure. So there is neither the moral nor the mental resistance at this point to the drug alcohol phenomenon or the babies making babies.